What would you say is your greatest flaw? A common one people bring up is perfectionism. I personally love using this in job interviews. Or maybe you're too stubborn, or on the other end, more of a people pleaser. Overcoming your personal flaws, dealing with them in a way that mitigates the harm they might cause to those around you, is something humans have grappled with since we formed civilizations. Okay, I don't actually know that for sure, but doesn't it kind of sound like it would be true? We live in a society. Yeah, okay. I think it would be interesting to explore this facet of our existence and how we have tried throughout the years to confront our greatest flaws and fears. With a movie! Haider is a 2014 Indian crime drama film that takes place during the 1995 Kashmiri border conflicts, a time of social and political upheaval marked by military violence and civilian disappearances. Sound familiar, Americans? It is loosely based on Curfewed Night, a frontline memoir of life, love, and war in Kashmir by Kashmiri-American journalist Vishal, as well as William Shakespeare's tragedy Hamlet. The descriptional blurb reads, "Epic betrayals, existential crises, and an Oedipal complex pave a young man's turbulent path to avenge his father's death in a conflict-torn Kashmir." That sounds spicy. But oh no, what was that word? An Oedipal complex? Oh man, sounds like we're gonna need to revisit an old bald friend of ours. I hate to bring up Freud again on my channel, but no, come on. We can't credit all associations of the Oedipus complex to a bald guy from the 19th century. I mean, it's even named after an ancient Greek myth, the origins of which are attributed to approximately 400 BC. Actually, come on, let's go through the myth again. King Laius and Queen Jocasta of Thebes have a son named Oedipus who is prophesied to grow up and kill his father and marry his mother. To thwart this prophecy, the king has a shepherd leave his baby on a hill to die of exposure to the elements, because he can't just kill the baby in cold blood, right? Like, that's too harsh. And also, that's not too much of a weird thing in these myths. People would leave their babies to die of exposure all the time. But of course, the shepherd also feels pretty bad about leaving the baby to die on a hill. So instead of leaving the baby to die on the hill, he passes the baby off to another one of his shepherd bros, who's tight with the king of another kingdom named King Polybius. So that king and his wife, they raise Oedipus as their own, and then Oedipus grows up and he hears about the father-killing, mother-marrying prophecy from the Oracle of Delphi, and he's horrified. So he runs away from home to thwart the prophecy. Yeah, I know. Probably could have been avoided if the king and queen had just taken a second to tell their son that he was adopted, but ironic, isn't it? But we're not even all the way there yet. Oedipus leaves for Thebes to make his way in the world because, he might not be a king anymore, but, that doesn't mean he can't be great. His journey doesn't start off great, though, because he ends up getting into an altercation with a wealthy traveling nobleman and killing him. He, keeps pushing, though, because he's a go-getter. And eventually he arrives at Thebes, which is where he comes to learn that Thebes has actually been being terrorized by the mythical creature of the Sphinx, which won't let you pass without answering her riddle correctly. Oedipus is pretty sharp, of course, so he answers correctly, defeating the Sphinx, and then is offered the recently vacated position as King of Thebes. Recently vacated because their king had recently been killed by a stranger while on his travels. Oedipus thinks this is a pretty sweet deal, seeing as he just left his own pretty cushy position back home only to stumble upon another throne ready for the taking. They even offer the widowed queen's hand in marriage. Another great deal because she's not as old as you might think, and she's still pretty hot. And then, Oedipus also swears to avenge his predecessor, of course. So while he's on that quest to avenge the dead king, Oedipus eventually discovers that the wealthy nobleman that he'd killed at the start of his journey was actually that king, the king of Thebes. And then on her end, Jocasta realizes that Oedipus is her son and that she has unknowingly fulfilled the prophecy foretold before his birth. And so she hangs herself, pretty miserable. And then Oedipus returns home to discover that not only is he a widower, but he's also an orphan. Yikes. Putting the pieces together. He takes 2 brooches from Jocasta's dead body and uses them to blind himself, and then he wanders the earth blind and helpless as penance for the sins that he's committed against his parents and himself and the gods at large. Now that is a tragedy, right? And what makes it so compelling? Why has the myth of Oedipus Rex captivated audiences for centuries after its most popular iteration? Well, what makes a tragedy? Is it any sad story? Is a Nicholas Sparks novel a tragedy? No, actually.
It's trash! Trash! Trash!
At least not for our purposes. Arthur Miller, the guy who wrote Death of a Salesman, which I have not read actually, so if you read it for high school, let me know in the comments, I guess, how it was. Should I read it? Anyway, he wrote an article defining the tragic hero in his essay, Tragedy and the Common Man. He writes, "There is a misconception of tragedy with which I have been struck in review after review, and in many conversations with writers and readers alike. It is the idea that tragedy is of necessity allied to pessimism. Even the dictionary says nothing more about the word than that it means a story with a sad or unhappy ending. In truth, tragedy implies more optimism in its author than does comedy, and its final result ought to be the reinforcement of the onlooker's brightest opinions of the human animal. For if it is true to say that in essence the tragic hero is intent upon claiming his whole due as a personality, and if this struggle must be total and without reservation, then it automatically demonstrates the indestructible will of man to achieve his humanity. The possibility of victory must be there in tragedy. Where pathos rules, where pathos is finally derived, a character has fought a battle he could not have possibly won. The pathetic is achieved when the protagonist is, by virtue of his witlessness, his insensitivity, or by the very air he gives off, incapable of grappling with a much superior force. Pathos, truly, is the mode for the pessimist. But tragedy requires a nicer balance between what is possible and what is impossible. And it is curious, although edifying, that the plays we revere century after century are the tragedies. In them, and in them alone, lies the belief optimistic, if you will, in the perfectibility of man. Miller identifies the tragic hero as not just someone who has been given a miserable lot in life, but as someone who actively seeks to change these circumstances and fails anyway. He can't just be someone who is dealt a terrible hand from birth and forced to live with it. There has to be the possibility that this could all have been avoided. There has to be as much room for the greatness as there is for the tragedy. To be clear, the presence of this possibility for greatness does not mean the tragic hero could have avoided his fate. Aristotle, when defining a tragedy in his famous literary text, the Poetics, stresses that the heroes in these stories, great as they may be, are still secondary to the plot in that they don't have as much impact over their fate as a typical hero would in their story. The plot, then, is the first principle, the soul of a tragedy. Character holds the second place. It doesn't matter what Oedipus does. He was always going to end up killing his father and marrying his mother. His actions and his father's actions to avoid their fates only go further in cementing them. The tragedy is that there was a chance that things could have been different, that things didn't have to go this way, many chances, actually. There were, quite a few events that, if done differently, could have saved all of them. But the tragedy is that Oedipus undoubtedly was always going to end up this way. There is no changing that. I'm taking the time to talk about tragedy and the tragic hero because I feel like that part gets lost when we talk about Oedipus, thanks to that bald guy borrowing the name for his weird-ass theory. The takeaway from Oedipus's story is not supposed to be that he secretly hated his father or that he secretly desired his mother. The point is that he did two of the most unspeakable things a progeny can do to their parents. He was horrified at what he'd done. You're supposed to see the suffering of the tragic hero on stage and grieve for them. You grieve for Oedipus, and in turn, you grieve for yourself. Externalize those feelings that you may have been keeping bottled up inside you for however long to cope with it. Got it? Alright. Now moving on from Oedipus, but keeping that Oedipal complex in mind, let's talk about another tragic hero we all know and love, Hamlet. Bare bones plot. Hamlet is about the Prince of Denmark, named Hamlet. He has a gay best friend named Horatio and a fiancée named Ophelia. His dad is dead and his mom is gonna marry his dad's brother, so his uncle. But then Hamlet has a dream, a vision you could say. The ghost of his father comes to him and tells Hamlet, hey, my brother Claudius, your uncle Claudius, actually murdered me in an attempt to seize the throne and marry your mom because she's kind of a MILF. So you're gonna need to get revenge for me. And then Hamlet, he's always been angsty, but now he has a reason to be. My uncle killed his brother and is marrying his sister-in-law, who is my mom. That is so messed up. I need to get revenge for my poor cucked father. The rest of the play is what unfolds on Hamlet's quest for revenge. What's unique about Hamlet as a tragic hero is that he's very much, how to put this gently, a pussy. He's emotional, broody, indecisive. Instead of just killing his uncle and being done with it, he spends most of the play debating broad issues of morality, like whether his uncle deserves to die, whether anyone deserves to die, or more specifically be killed, and smaller issues like, can I trust my fiancée, who is the daughter of Uncle Claudius's most trusted advisor, Polonius? Can I trust my besties, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern? Am I gay for Horatio? That last one is more subtext, but definitely there, trust me. At first glance, he doesn't seem to bear much resemblance to the figure of other tragic heroes we're familiar with, like Oedipus or Macbeth. For one thing, Hamlet isn't a king, or even in direct contention for the throne, because, that will go to Claudius next. He's not a go-getting vagabond like Oedipus is at the start of his story, nor is he an ambitious general with aims for the throne like Macbeth. He never shows much concern for power at all, honestly. Hamlet's princehood is almost tangential, if not entirely irrelevant, to the conflicts that plague him throughout the story. He is described as being prone to melancholy, which was medieval code for probably depressed, but also really whiny and annoying about it. While most other tragic heroes trigger their downfall through a series of decisions that propel them toward their doomed fate, Hamlet stands out in that he rarely makes any decisions throughout the narrative. One of Hamlet's defining character traits is his intelligence. While Oedipus had his moments, he was for the most part a straightforward man who requires an oracle to reveal the tragedy that he has entrenched himself in. Same with Macbeth, who is a decorated and brave Scottish general, but is still aided by his more politically cunning wife, Lady Macbeth, through more of the intelligence-oriented parts of the political takeover. Hamlet is smart, though. He knows what kind of story he's in, a story about revenge. What he can't decide, though, is whether he wants to play. He has an image of himself as the melancholic prince who's above the trivial courtly power plays, right? Part of his disgust with Claudius's actions is that His uncle was so infatuated with power that he was able to kill his own brother to achieve it. And this is something that Hamlet obviously considers himself above, because men who let themselves get bogged down by this lust for power and ambition and stuff like that always lead to their own ruin. But then he also has this image of himself as a very loving son, right? And as a loving son, it's his duty to his father to get revenge for him. So what does he do? The tragedy of Hamlet is not that his fate was sealed the moment he learned that his uncle killed his father to marry his mother. The tragedy is that Hamlet saw the chance to avoid this destruction and failed to take it. You're probably thinking, what the hell? She didn't even talk about the movie that she mentioned at the top of the video. And you're right, I didn't, but that's because I think that you should go watch it for yourself. It's on Netflix. And yeah, that's right. This video has secretly been a why you should watch insert movie video. Plus, I really feel like I gave you all the primer that you really needed to go into it with, you know? Laying down the Oedipal complex and Hamlet. I mean, like, anything else would honestly be spoilers, so you're welcome. I'll leave y'all with another quote about the modern iteration of the tragic hero, you know, to round out this video about the evolution of the tragic hero. Again, from the Arthur Miller's essay on the subject. The quality in such plays that does shake us, however, derives from the underlying fear of being displaced. The disaster inherent in being torn away from our chosen image of what and who we are in this world. Among us today, this fear is strong, and perhaps stronger than it ever was. In fact, it is the common man who knows this fear the best. So go watch Haider, and let me know what you think. Well, I guess you can't do that yet because you haven't watched it. Unless you have, in which case, you know, let me know in the comments. And if you haven't watched it, you can still comment. Go ahead and tell me your favorite Shakespearean adaptation below in the comments. Wow, that sounded like such a professional YouTuber thing, huh? Also, please like the video because honestly, I don't know. At this point, didn't YouTube take away dislikes for y'all too? Well, I mean, I guess then you might as well just like the video. I mean, what harm, right? Yeah, all right. Oh, by the way, thanks to Tiffany Ferguson, but you know, channel Tiffany Ferg, for shouting me out. That was like so nice of you. I mean, I know it was like, you know, part of like the small channel shout outs, but I mean, whoever also submitted my channel, that was really nice of you because it wasn't me. I swear. I know that sounds really suspicious. I didn't even know. I mean, I watch your videos. I'm a fan. Whatever, it's fine. So thank you if you submitted my channel, and thank you to Tiffany Ferg because I also love your videos and you're really cool and I like your politics as well. So, you know, good for that. All right, thanks for watching. I love you parasocially, and bye.